Coming up on IDCOM's Media Snack, it's Super Bowl special. Welcome to IDCOM's Media Snack, episode VIII. It's the Super Bowl special. Today we're going to be looking at just at the Super Bowl because it's such a unique media event, and we will do some specials like this across the year to look at some kind of the key media phenomena that happen at certain times of the year. We're going to look at the Super Bowl, what it's about and how it works from a media perspective.
Why brands still invest enormous amounts of money supporting it.
Yeah, and also how it's being transformed and evolved with the impact of digital and social channels. All coming up on this week's IDCOM's Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a hot dog. So, Super Bowl. What is it? So it's an annual event to American football teams play each other.
That's right.
7th of February this year in San Francisco.
The Levi Stadium.
The Levi Stadium. So it's a football game. So why is it such a media phenomenon? What is it about the Super Bowl?
It's not just a media phenomenon. I think it's a cultural phenomenon. Let's just look at some very basic figures. The telecast lasts for 4 hours. The game itself lasts for 60 minutes, broken into 4 quarters. There is 48 minutes worth of advertising available, and that is going to generate in excess of $330 million worth of ad revenue.
Amazing, amazing. So that's what 12 minutes an hour of advertising, which is about standard for a network.
Yeah.
But why is it so highly prized? And you know, this year, what are people actually paying for Super Bowl ads?
They're paying for 100 million viewers. So a third of the US population will be tuning in on the 7th of February to watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And it's unprecedented. You will never get access to so many people at one time in the entire year. Yeah,
in a live event, which is engaging TV. But I mean, the thing that makes it a media phenomenon or an advertising phenomenon, which is why we're talking about it, is that it's the time when people talk about advertising,
Absolutely.
Right? So people say they watch the Super Bowl for the ads.
50% of the people that will be watching the Super Bowl will be watching it simply because they want to see the commercials that are in the 48 minutes worth of airtime.
And it's so CBS are hosting it, and they're selling the airtime. It's bought on a spot-by-spot basis. Some brands have long-term agreements. So someone like Anheuser-Busch in the US has been, I think, a Super Bowl advertiser since 1989, I think it is. Right. And they still buy 3-4 minutes worth of airtime at a time and might spread that across different brands. Some brands just come in and out of the Super Bowl and use it for a one-off, big coverage build. Why do brands prize the Super Bowl so much? What is it to a brand that makes it really worth buying 30 seconds worth of airtime just for $5 million?
That's right, because it is a showcase of the best advertising in the world. And the $5 million that is invested on that 30-second spot is often a fraction of the amount of money that is invested on the production of those commercials. It is the one moment in the year when you want to be putting your best marketing communications foot forward. Yeah.
It's actually the only time you can guarantee, perhaps, or nearly guarantee, that people are going to watch your ad.
And talk
so
about
it could be the best $5 million that you ever spend on TV advertising.
That's right.
Or the hardest working, perhaps.
That's right. But they don't just talk about it, on the 7th of February. They've been talking about this for weeks. Most smart advertisers will have begun to tease or seed their commercials way in advance of the official launch on the 7th of February. Yeah. And that's just a really brilliant marketing ploy. So essentially they're advertising their advertising.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. I think it's interesting to look at the way advertisers are using this opportunity. We're going to throw over to Stefan Schwartz, who's our business analyst. Stefan, what can you tell us about how digital and social channels have transformed the way advertisers are using the Super Bowl?
Well, guys, what we're seeing on the internet is that the digital and social media is having a real impact on how Super Bowl advertising is actually being consumed. Especially, we see that it stretches out beyond just the 30 seconds or 60 seconds that people watch it on TV. What we're seeing is that the conversations that consumers and brands have actually stretches out over a longer period that can be divided into 3 phases: pre-game, during the game, and post-game. So what we're seeing is, in the pre-game phase, that people have begun searching for Super Bowl ads over a month before the actual game day. YouTube reports that 4 million hours of YouTube videos have been consumed between January and February of 2015. That accounts for 40% of total YouTube viewing time of Super Bowl ads. And what's remarkable is that's an 81% increase from 2014 in the same time span. So what we're really seeing is that brands are putting their ads out there before the game, creating buzz, creating excitement, creating anticipation for the actual ad before the actual ad itself airs on TV. Now what we're also seeing is that during the game, viewers are not 100% focused on the ads. They're also consuming YouTube videos of the ads during the game. YouTube reports that 300,000 hours of YouTube Super Bowl ads were consumed while the game was going on last year. So these are very big numbers. And then finally, when we get into the last stage, what we see is that viewership tends to rise even further for YouTube ads. For some, it even tends to spike exponentially. As we can see here, tracking the top viewed ads from last year, we see that 7 out of 10 top viewed ads posted their videos before game day. And what we see here as we move further towards game day, that these numbers continue to rise. And for some ads, after game day, they completely spike. And remarkably, Facebook accounts for 70% of the shared views. So we're seeing a massive, massive kind of inverse correlation between on Facebook. 25% of views, but 70% of the shares. So you're really seeing that people are out there sharing the content through Facebook, and thereby creating or sustaining momentum that brands gained in the pre and during game phase. So essentially what you're seeing is that social media has had a real impact on how brands advertise. It creates buzz in the pre-game phase. They are able to react spontaneously during the game to any events that happen spontaneously in the game, such as in 2013 during the blackout, when brands reacted quickly on Twitter. And then you see the post-game phase where the ads basically are a call to action for consumers to dig deeper online. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Stefan. And are brands paying for this reach, or is this all free coverage that they're getting on YouTube and Facebook?
That's a great question, Tom. Actually, what we're seeing is that advertisers are paying for these views. For example, if we look at YouTube, last year, Super Bowl ads roughly totaled out to roughly 300 million views. 200 million of those were actually paid for by the advertisers. So that's roughly 66% of views were paid for, totaling out to roughly $20 million in ad spend for YouTube views in last year's Super Bowl advertising.
So what that's suggesting to us is that brands are looking at the Super Bowl less as a moment in time, more as a campaign.
Yep.
So they are beginning to look at different ways of engaging their consumers in advance of the Super Bowl, so that it actually builds to a crescendo at the time that their spot launches, actually within the game itself.
Yeah, which they call a tentpole, I think is the common terminology for that, which is a big spike in coverage or a moment in time which you can actually hang a much broader campaign on. I mean, what's some examples of brands then that have used or are using that approach?
Well, Doritos is a really good one. So I think they've been partnering with the Super Bowl for the last 4 or 5 years. And they've created a really smart mechanic whereby they engage with their consumers to create content. And the best content is actually aired within the Super Bowl itself.
Yeah.
So they bring in the campaign far earlier, they engage with their consumers, they ask them to generate the content, and then the content is actually aired within the program itself.
So Doritos is a good example of a brand that gets it right. Not everybody gets it right. No. So when it goes wrong, where does it go wrong?
Probably the most high-profile recent failure was Nationwide last year, who I'm sure from a productions value got it absolutely perfect, but from a mood perspective, I think they could have done better.
Yeah, and so their creative, there's quite a backlash actually against the ad that they ended up running in that very expensive spot, and I think post-game research suggested that actually a lot of their brand scores went down, having invested millions and millions in this ad. So it's a high-stakes game.
It is.
If you're going to put your money on the table in the Super Bowl, you've got to do it right and execute it well.
Absolutely. But you've also got to judge the mood of the audience. Absolutely right as well.
Yeah. There are some great examples of brands who don't even buy a Super Bowl spot, actually then hijacking
and owning it.
And owning a moment. And the best example of success I think we've seen on that is Volvo from last year, did a great partnership with Twitter called Interception. And the idea, which they communicated prior to the game, was that any time you saw a car ad in the Super Bowl, of which there are lots, I think there's about 8 or 9 different car advertisers going to the Super Bowl, so it's very cluttered. So every time you saw a competitive brand in the Super Bowl, if you tweeted Volvo, you had the opportunity to nominate someone you know to be given a Volvo. And the numbers, we'll leave links to the campaign, the Twitter campaign, because the numbers that they drove were astounding. And what they did was very clever from a media perspective, is that every time their competitor's ad was on the TV, the first thing people did was look away.
Yeah, it's just
look to their mobile.
It's brilliant ambush marketing.
Yeah. Okay, finally then, what do we learn from the Super Bowl? What can we take from this analysis?
Well, firstly, I hope that the legacy of the Super Bowl will last indefinitely. It is, without question, the most valuable sporting franchise in the world. It attracts the most money, it attracts the most high-profile brands that invest huge amounts of money in the creation of the advertising. For me, it says it should encourage advertisers and marketeers to invest at least as much time and effort and consideration in the way that they go to market for the other 51 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be about one moment in time.
And it's a great media opportunity, but it's a great showcase, isn't it, for the industry?
Absolutely.
Not just from a creativity perspective, but you see agencies really collaborating in the weeks and months prior to Super Bowl. You see the height of great thinking, great strategy often. And that's the thing, it does help us set a high bar. And at a time when there's so much scrutiny and focus on the quality of advertising, in particularly reference to things like ad blocking, why can't the Super Bowl and events like that be a template really for brands of how they should be working the rest of the year?
Absolutely. It should inspire the best of the industry to showcase their best work.
So, are we making any predictions?
We are.
So who do you think for the Super Bowl?
Patriots.
Patriots? I'll go Cardinals. So Patriots, Cardinals, watch it. That's it for this episode of Media Snack, the Super Bowl special. Thank you for watching.
Have a good weekend.